The desert winds howled across the barren airstrip as soldiers ran in a frantic blur. Dust whipped into the sky, blinding eyes and choking throats, but no one dared stop. A massive helicopter sat grounded, its blades still, its frame trembling under the pressure of time. The mission was critical. Lives depended on that bird lifting off again. Yet no matter how many technicians crowded around its panels, no matter how many tools sparked against its metal, the machine would not breathe. The air was thick with frustration and fear. A general, decorated with stars that glittered under the harsh sun, stood silent, arms crossed, his jaw tight. His eyes weren't on the men working. They were on the horizon, where the enemy waited. The helicopter was not just a machine, it was the only way to extract stranded soldiers caught behind hostile lines. Every passing second was another second those men might never live through. The technicians swarmed like bees around a dying hive, shouting codes, cursing bolts, banging against stubborn parts. Nothing worked. The silence of the grounded blades was louder than a scream. "Sir," one of the officers said finally, his voice low with defeat. "We can't get her running. She's finished." The general turned sharply. His eyes, hard as iron, met the officer's. For a moment, no words came. Then his voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "No machine is finished. Not this one. Not today." But the truth was plain. They had the best men working, young, brilliant, trained in the latest systems. And yet, the helicopter stayed dead. That was when the general made a decision no one expected. He reached for a name buried in history, a name most had forgotten, a name that lived not in manuals or screens but in whispers of old war stories. "Call him," the general ordered. The officer hesitated. "Sir, he's been retired for years." Call him," the general repeated, his tone final. And so, from a small, quiet house on the edge of town, a man was summoned. He was not in uniform. His hands were not clean like the young technicians, but worn, calloused, marked with grease and scars from battles fought long ago. His name was Master Sergeant Daniel Cole. A combat veteran. A mechanic when machines were less forgiving, when survival depended on instinct, not just manuals. He arrived without ceremony, stepping onto the airstrip with boots that carried both age and strength. His hair was graying, his walk steady but heavy. The soldiers stared at him, some curious, others doubtful. He wasn't polished. He wasn't young. He didn't belong in their sleek world of technology and precision. But the general's eyes lit with something no one else understood: hope. Daniel didn't waste time with introductions. He walked straight to the grounded helicopter, placed a hand against its side as if greeting an old friend, and closed his eyes. For a moment, the frantic noise of the technicians faded. There was only silence, the silence of a man listening not with his ears, but with his soul. "Tell everyone to step back," Daniel said quietly. The young men looked at one another, scoffing, but the general nodded. "Clear the area." Reluctantly, the technicians pulled away, leaving Daniel alone with the machine. He pulled a rag from his pocket, wiped his hands, and leaned down to inspect the parts. No tablet, no computer, no manual, just eyes, touch, and memory. His hands moved slowly at first, then faster, tightening bolts, adjusting wires, knocking against panels until the sound told him a story no one else could hear. "Sir," one of the younger men whispered to the general, "this is a waste of time." But the general didn't answer. He only watched. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Sweat soaked Daniel's shirt, grease painted his arms. His breaths grew heavier, but his eyes burned with focus. He whispered under his breath, almost talking to the helicopter, coaxing it back to life. Finally, he climbed into the cockpit. His fingers brushed the controls like a pianist touching keys. He pulled a single lever, then paused. The air grew still. Soldiers held their breath. And then, with a roar that shook the ground, the blades began to turn. Slowly at first, creaking, groaning, resisting, then faster, faster, until the sky filled with thunder. The helicopter came alive, its body trembling, then steadying, as though rising from death itself. The soldiers erupted in cheers. The technicians stared in disbelief. The general's chest swelled with pride, but his eyes glistened too, because he knew what this moment meant. Daniel stepped down from the cockpit, his face streaked with sweat and oil. He didn't smile. He only nodded once, as if to say, "It's ready. Do your job." The general walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. For a moment, they stood in silence, two men from different worlds, bound by the same duty. You just saved them, the general said softly. Daniel looked past him, toward the horizon where soldiers waited for rescue. No, General. That machine saved them. I just reminded her who she was. The words sank deep, heavier than any applause. The helicopter lifted off, soaring into the sky, carrying hope to those stranded men. The thunder of its blades echoed not just across the desert, but through the hearts of everyone watching. They would never forget the sight of an old veteran, long forgotten, breathing life into steel when all else failed. As the chopper disappeared into the horizon, Daniel quietly picked up his rag, wiped his hands, and turned to leave. Where are you going? The general called after him. Back home, Daniel replied without looking back. My war ended years ago. But every soldier on that field knew the truth, some wars never end. They simply live on in the hands, hearts, and memories of those who once fought them. The general raised his hand in salute, holding it firm until Daniel's figure faded into the distance. And that was the last time many of them ever saw him. A forgotten combat veteran, called one final time, to save not just a machine, but the lives it carried. So if you felt the weight of this story, if it touched something in your heart, then don't just move on. Share this story. Honor the forgotten heroes. And if you want more stories like this, filled with sacrifice, courage, and the moments that change everything, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes, the world needs to remember.